This is your host, Danny, and this is English Plus Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about Japanese mythology. What do you know about Japanese mythology? Would you like to learn more? So join me in this episode and we will talk about Japanese mythology. But before we do that, let me remind you that you can become a patron of English Plus Podcast, support me to continue producing episodes for English Plus and English Plus Magazine. And by doing that, you will have access to all premium episodes and to every issue of English Plus Magazine. And soon there is even something more coming your way. So become a patron today and support English Plus to continue. And now, without further ado, let's talk about Japanese mythology. The mythology of Japan has a long history dating back more than 2,000 years. It became part of two major religious traditions, Shinto, a religion that developed in Japan, and Buddhism, which developed in India and came to Japan from China and Korea. Japanese mythology includes a vast number of gods, goddesses, and spirits. Most of the stories concern the creation of the world, the foundation of the islands of Japan, and the activities of deities, humans, animals, spirits, and magical creatures. Some myths describe characters and events associated with particular places in Japan. Others are set in legendary locations such as the heavens or the underworld or the land of the dead. For many centuries, myths were transmitted orally in Japan. In 712 CE, a written version of the mythology, the Kojiki, was compiled for the court of the Emperor of Japan. The tales in the Kojiki tell of the creation of the world, the origin of the gods, and the ancestry of the Japanese emperors who claim descent from the sun god Amaterasu. Another early source of Japanese mythology is the Nihonji, also known as the Nihon Shoki, which means the Chronicles of Japan. Completed in 720 CE, this work also includes various myths and legends, and it helps establish the genealogy of the imperial family. The Nihonji was greatly influenced by Chinese and Korean history and mythology. Both the Kojiki and the Nihonji contain elements of Taoism, a Chinese religious movement that was introduced to Japan by the 600s. Now let's talk about the core deities and characters in Japanese mythology. In Japanese mythology, everything in nature has a kami, which means a deity or spirit. As a result, the Japanese pantheon, or collection of recognized gods, is enormous, with some sources claiming that there are millions of different spirits and deities. Throughout Japan, local myths and legends tell about the kami of a particular place, such as a rock, a pair of trees, or a mountain. However, several major deities appear in significant roles in a number of stories from different regions. The two most important creator deities are Izanagi and his sister Izanami. According to the myths, they made the islands of Japan as well as many of the gods and goddesses. Izanagi and Izanami also appear in a story about a descent to Yomi, which is a land of darkness and death associated with the underworld. Perhaps the best-known Japanese deity is the sun goddess Amaterasu. Said to be the ancestor of the imperial family, she brings light into the world and is responsible for fertility. Her shrine at Ise is considered by many to be the most important shrine in Japan. Amaterasu has two brothers, the moon god Tsukiyomi and Susanoo, a powerful and violent god often associated with storms. Of the two, Susanoo plays a more important role in mythology, appearing in a number of major legends, including several with Amaterasu. Oku Ninoshi, a descendant of Susanoo, probably his son, is a central character in the Izumo cycle, which is a series of myths set in the Izumo region of western Japan. Like the heroes in the legends of other cultures, Oku Ninoshi has many adventures and undergoes various ordeals. One of the most popular deities of Japanese mythology is Hashiman. a protector of warriors. The character of Hashiman is based on the Emperor Ojin, who lived in the 300 CE and was renowned for his military skills. According to tradition, after Ojin died, he became the god Hashiman. In the 700s, Hashiman became part of the Shinto pantheon. The god Inari appears in few myths, but he is important because of his association with the growing of rice, the major food crop in Japan. Thought to bring prosperity, Inari is the patron of merchants and sword makers. Among the many spirits and creatures in Japan mythology are the Tengu. These are minor deities that are part human and part bird. According to tradition, they live in trees in mountainous areas. The Tengu enjoy playing tricks on humans but resent being tricked themselves. They are more mischievous than wicked. Then we have the Oni, a more threatening group of spirits. They may have originated in China and traveled to Japan with Buddhism. These horned demons, often of enormous size, can take human or animal shape. Sometimes invisible, the Oni have the ability to steal the souls of humans. They can be very cruel and are associated with various evil forces such as famine and disease. Japanese mythology also includes other Buddhist deities. In addition to stories about the life of Buddha, many tales concern Amida, the ruler of a paradise called the Pure Land, Kanon, the protector of children and women in childbirth, and Jizo, who rescues souls from hell, are also important Buddhist figures. A group of monkey-like creatures called kappa displays both good and evil qualities in Japanese myth. Associated with water, they live in rivers, ponds, and lakes and carry water in a hollow space on top of their heads. If the water spills, the kappa lose their magical powers. Kappa drink the blood of humans, horses, and cattle, but they also eat cucumbers, and families can avoid being attacked by throwing a cucumber bearing their names into the kappa's watery home. Among the kappa's good qualities is a tendency to be polite. When they meet someone, they bow, often spilling the water in their heads. They also always keep their promises. In many tales, humans outwit the kappa by forcing them to make promises. And now let's talk about some major myths in Japanese mythology. The most important stories in Japanese mythology deal with the creation and the goddess Amaterasu. Deeply rooted in nature, they vividly describe the formation of the landscape and the origin of forces such as fire, wind, and light. Now let's talk about creation myths in Japanese mythology. According to the Kojiki, in the beginning there was only an ancient ooze, out of which heaven and earth were formed. Life emerged from this mud. In heaven, 3 deities, followed by 2 others, appeared. These 5 became the separate heavenly deities. They were followed by the 7 generations of the Age of the Gods, 2 single deities and 5 male and female couples. The 2 single deities came out of a reed-like substance floating in the ooze. When the youngest pair of deities, Izanagi and Izanami, were born, the other gods ordered them to make solid land out of the material drifting in the sea. Standing on the floating bridge of heaven, Izanagi and Izanami stirred the ancient ocean with a jeweled spear. When they pulled up the spear to see if any material had gathered on it, drops of salty water dripped down into the sea and formed an island called Onogoru. Izanagi and Izanami left heaven and went to live on the island. They married and produced 8 children who became the islands of Japan. Izanagi and Izanami then created gods and goddesses of the trees, mountains, valleys, streams, winds, and other natural features of Japan. While giving birth to the fire god Kagutsushi, Izanami was badly burned. As she lay dying, she produced more gods and goddesses. Other deities emerged from the tears of her grief-stricken husband. When Izanami died, she went to Yomi, the land of darkness and death. Izanagi followed her there and tried to bring her back. Izanami, hidden in shadow, told him that she would try to secure her release from the gods of the underworld, but that he must wait and not attempt to see her. When she did not come back for a long while, Izanagi looked for her. He discovered her rotting corpse and fled in terror. Izanami was angry that Izanagi had seen her and sent hideous spirits to chase him. Izanagi managed to escape, and he sealed off the passage to Yomi with a huge boulder. Izanami remained there and ruled over the dead. Feeling unclean from his contact with the dead, Izanagi decided to bathe in a stream to purify himself. As he undressed, gods and goddesses emerged from his discarded clothing. Others came forth while he washed. Susanoo came from his nose. Tsukiyomi emerged from his right eye, and Amaterasu appeared from his left eye. Izanagi divided the world among these three gods. He gave Susanoo control of the oceans, assigned Tsukiyomi the realm of the night, and made Amaterasu the ruler of the sun and the heavens. And now let's talk about myths of Amaterasu. One famous myth tells how Susanoo, Amaterasu's brother, was unhappy with his share of the world and caused much destruction. Banished to Yomi, he asked to go to heaven to see his sister, the sun goddess, one last time. Amaterasu became concerned that Susanoo might be planning to take over her lands. The two agreed to a contest to prove their power. If Susanoo won, he could stay in heaven forever, but if he lost, he would have to leave. Amaterasu asked for her brother's sword, which she broke into 3 pieces and chewed in her mouth. When Amaterasu spit out the pieces, they turned into 3 goddesses. Susanoo then took a string of 5 star-shaped beads that Amaterasu had given him. He put the beads in his mouth, chewed them, and spat out 5 gods. Susanoo claimed victory because he had produced 5 gods and Amaterasu had produced only 3 gods. However, Amaterasu pointed out that he had created these gods from her possessions, which proved that her power was actually greater than his. Susanoo refused to acknowledge defeat, and Amaterasu allowed him to remain in heaven. While in heaven, Susanoo began doing things that offended his sister and violated important rules. He destroyed rice fields, made loud noises, and dirtied the floors of her palace. Finally, Susanoo killed one of the horses of heaven, skinned it, and hurled it into the hall where Amaterasu was weaving cloth. This so angered Amaterasu that she hid in a cave and refused to come out. When the sun goddess concealed herself, the world was plunged into darkness. Plants stopped growing, and all activities came to a halt. Desperate for Amaterasu's return, 800 gods gathered to discuss ways of getting her to leave the cave. A wise god named Omorikane proposed a solution. The gods hung a mirror on the branches of a tree outside the cave. Then they had a young goddess named Amano Uzume dance to music while they laughed loudly. Amaterasu heard the noise and wondered what was happening. Opening the door to the cave a little, she asked why the gods were so happy. They told her that they were celebrating because they had found a goddess superior to her. Curious at who this goddess might be, Amaterasu opened the door wider to look and saw her own image in the mirror. When she paused to gaze at her reflection, a god hiding nearby pulled her completely out of the cave. Another god then blocked the entrance with a magic rope. After Amaterasu emerged from the cave, her light shone once again and life returned to normal. To punish Susanoo for his actions, the gods banished him from heaven. And now let's talk about the Izumo cycle. The Izumo cycle of myths features the god Okuninoshi, a descendant of Susanoo. One of the most famous stories is about Okuninoshi and the White Rabbit. According to this tale, Okuninoshi had 80 brothers, each of whom wanted to marry the same beautiful princess. On a journey to see the princess, the brothers came upon a rabbit with no fur in great pain at the side of the road. They told the animal that it could get its fur back by bathing in salt water, but this only made the pain worse. A little while later, Okuninoshi arrived and saw the suffering rabbit. When he asked what had happened, the rabbit told him how it had lost its fur. One day, while traveling between 2 islands, the rabbit persuaded some crocodiles to form a bridge so it could cross the water. In return, the rabbit promised to count the crocodiles to see whether they were more numerous than the creatures of the sea. As the rabbit neared the far shore, the crocodiles realized that the promise was only a trick to get the rabbit across the water. Furious, the last crocodile seized the rabbit and tore off its skin. After hearing this story, Okuninoshi told the rabbit to bathe in clean water and then roll in some grass pollen on the ground. The rabbit followed this plan, and new white fur soon grew on its body. The rabbit, who was actually a god, rewarded Okuninoshi by promising that he would marry the beautiful princess. Okuninoshi's success angered his brothers, and a number of other myths in the Izumo cycle tell about the struggles between them. I mean, there are thousands of stories in Japanese mythology, and all of them are so exciting, but I will have to stop here and go on to talk about some key themes and symbols in Japanese mythology. Japanese mythology features many of the same themes that are found in the mythologies of other cultures. The sun, as embodied in Amaterasu, is the most important figure in many of the tales, reflecting the importance of the sun in maintaining food and warmth to the Japanese people. As with some other cultures, the specific theme of the sun in hiding, which causes crops to wither and the earth to grow cold, is a prominent myth, if not the most prominent myth. The act of creation is also a recurring theme in Japanese mythology. Aside from the tales of Izanagi and Izanami, who created the islands of Japan as well as the original gods and goddesses, later deities such as Amaterasu and Susanoo are also described as creating additional gods and goddesses with little effort. One of the most important symbols found in Japanese mythology is the mirror. The mirror is an important part of the myth of Amaterasu's hiding, since it lured the goddess from the cave and restores light to the world. The mirror represents honesty, since it reflects only what it is shown. A bronze mirror housed in the Ise shrine is believed to be the mirror used to lure Amaterasu from the cave and is one of the 3 sacred treasures that make up the imperial regalia of Japan. Mythology plays an important role in the lives of the Japanese people today. Myths and legends are the basis of much Japanese art, drama, and literature, and people still learn and tell stories about the gods and goddesses. Traditional Kagura dances are performed to honor the deities at Shinto shrines. Legend traces the origin of this ancient art from the dance that drew the goddess Amaterasu from her cave. So, as I told you, there is just a lot to talk about when it comes to Japanese mythology, but I will have to stop here, and I hope that I kind of told you about Japanese mythology in a nutshell, but in a way that will encourage you to seek more stories and learn more stories about this rich repository of myths and legends. Now, with that being said, let me thank you very much for listening to another Myths and Legends episode from English Plus Podcast. This is your host, Danny. I will see you next time.